start again. Tá is agin made Obery and Deputy Matthews, Madelish and Billisha, Drosgameg and Deesport the Queen and you. And I do think we would all have to acknowledge the hard work, the commitment, the dedication, and I think I would use the word passion that Deputy Matthews has shown in bringing this bill before the House today, this amendment to the Constitution to amend Article 15. And when you mentioned in Article 15 the phrase power to ensure freedom of debate, but I don't think it's enough to have freedom of debate. I think there has to be the freedom that that debate moves on further and that people can make the decisions based on how they debated in that particular discussion. I'm speaking as somebody who's not a member of a political party and so not bound by the whip system. And there is a freedom, there is an independence, it's almost a luxury when it comes to voting, of having that freedom to make up one's own mind. And in my 6 years here, there have been times when I have voted with the government, and there's the last government and with this government too. One major disadvantage I see in the whip system is the way in which it just polarises opinion. It's almost like a herd mentality that you must vote a certain way, and there's no outlet for individual thinking or independent thought. And it must be very frustrating being in a political party. I don't think it's possible to agree 100% with everything that the party has decided. So therefore, there's going to be times when you fundamentally disagree with something that your party is proposing. But under the whip system, you have to vote for this regardless of what you believe in. And there were two examples that I was thinking of when thinking about this bill and very forcibly struck by them. And one was in the last Dáil, and it was the stag hunting ban. And I know there were people on the government side who were against the ban being imposed, and equally that there were people on opposition, and because they were in opposition, they had to oppose the ban and had to oppose the bill, and support retaining the stag hunt. So there were active animal welfare supporters in both Labour and Fine Gael at that stage who did not want to vote against this. So I have to ask, is that really democratic? And then some weeks ago I had a private member's business here, and the topic was a human rights approach to budgets and equality proofing. And again, there were many speeches on the government side who acknowledged the value of what I was trying to do in this, the positive aspects. And anybody who was listening and anybody not knowing the system here would think that there was almost unanimous thinking on it. But of course, when it came to the vote, it was a different matter. And it always strikes me on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, no matter what the topic is, that there are people in the gallery and they come in because it's their issue that's being debated, and they come in thinking and hoping that the vote will be in their favour when the vote comes. But we all know here that the outcome has been well decided before the topic even gets into the floor to be discussed. And it's this kind of all-seeing, all-knowing persona that one inherits when you cross the floor from this side over to that side. But at the end of the day, we're all flawed human beings and nobody has all the answers, but collectively we might do a better job if we could work in a more collegial and a more congenial way. Imagine if we could really learn from each other. I think it could make a difference. And one way in which I think we see this is that why are there so few amendments to bills accepted by government? And I'm not talking about just this government, but I think any government. And it's back to the assumption that once you're sitting in those seats, you have all the wisdom, all the right answers, and I don't know if it's something in the air over that side of the House. And equally in opposition, any opposition are put in a position to oppose, and you might not always agree with opposing. There's no doubt that we do have a very, very strong party discipline here and a very tight whip system. And statistics show that Ireland has a full record almost of party unity in voting. There are some statistics from the last 30 years, I think, where there are 54 individual TDs from parties who voted against their parties, just 3% of all elected TDs from parties. Now, I'm not too sure, but there doesn't appear to have been any major gain or loss because that particular person did that. And we know about the UK system. I think it's interesting because there's some flexibility in the three-tier system. Times when it's absolutely essential to vote with the party, other times when votes are of lesser importance and it is possible to vote against the party. And we know that most European systems employ a whip system to a lesser extent than here. We have examples from America, New Zealand, Australia and other countries that allow for conscience votes. And I know that it's the German example that Deputy Matthews is using. So all of those examples, what's being proposed here, they place the TD or the MP beholden to their own judgment when it comes to deciding the merits or the demerits of a bill. I think a central issue is in relation to representation. We are elected by constituents and we represent those constituents to the best of our ability. We know the principles, the policies, the values on which they elect us, whether in a party or not a party, but I do believe there has to be some flexibility. We know there are many instances where TDs know that they're not acting in the best interest of those constituents when they have to vote a certain way, the way that they're told by the party. And that happens on both sides of the House. And I think that's undermining democracy. I think what's being proposed here, it gives TDs a degree of protection from arbitrary party intentions. And they're left freer to vote as they think will best represent their own principles and those of their constituents. A recent survey shows that there is an appetite for some reform and some relaxation of the whip. Now, I was a member of the Constitutional Convention, and while this issue was not one of the topics, there was discussion at the Dáil reform ones on, the surprise that the citizen members have that we didn't have that sort of freedom, those in parties didn't. And I know that there was a suggestion that the Ceann Comhairle would be elected by secret ballot and not appointed by the government. Now, I do wonder sometimes about the accuracy and validity of polls, but at the moment, independents are doing very well, with the highest of any bloc. And we vote outside the party system. And I have to ask, is that part of the reason for the increased support? There's arguments that the free vote will lead to a weakened and a fractured Parliament, but I think we can strike a balance, a working and a workable balance. Parliaments can be effective with conscience voting also. I accept that there do has to be lines drawn and there has to be a whip system in place for certain bills. Otherwise, we'd have elections several times a year. I think we should begin with this bill, with a free vote, and let's test the viability and the desirability of the proposal and give it a chance. Because you have to ask, what's the point in having private members' bills when so much work goes into them, when the passage or the progress is totally dependent on one side of the House? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.